Using server-side includes to include the contents of one file inside another is one of the most powerful features of PHP. Let's take a look at the advantages of server-side includes. One of the main ones is that all of the files are merged on the server, so it doesn't result in multiple requests from the browser. External files can contain just PHP code, HTML, or plain text. They can also contain a mixture of HTML and PHP. This makes it easy to reuse code by including files containing your own custom functions or one of the popular PHP frameworks. Server-side includes are also a great time saver when used for common web page elements such as header, footer, and navigation menu. Because each page uses the same external file, you can update a menu or other common element for the whole site by editing and uploading a single file. To include an external file, you use one of these four commands: include, include once, require, or require once. What's the difference between them? If you use either of the include commands, PHP attempts to continue processing the script even if the external file is missing or isn't readable. On the other hand, the two require commands stop processing the script if the external file isn't available, so require is being used in the sense of mandatory. The commands that end with once prevent the file from being included more than once. This is essential with files that contain function or class definitions, because attempting to redefine a function or class triggers a fatal error, bringing your script to a grinding halt. You need to be careful when using server-side includes to build web pages. The HTML should be valid after all the files have been merged. Think of using server-side includes like building a jigsaw. The include files should contain HTML fragments that, when finally pieced together, build a complete web page. The page shouldn't have multiple head and body elements. A useful strategy is to start with a static page, then cut and paste the HTML fragments to your include files. With server-side includes, the file name extension of the external files is unimportant. You can use any file name extension as long as the parent file is capable of processing PHP. Some developers like to use .inc to indicate that the file is intended to be used as a server-side include. However, most web servers treat .inc as plain text. That means sensitive content, such as passwords, could be exposed if the external file is stored inside the server's document root and accessed directly in a browser. It's more secure to use a double file name extension such as .inc.php or simply .php on its own. My preference is to use just .php and to store all external files in a dedicated folder. For even greater security, it's a good idea to store include files outside the server's document root. As long as the parent file is in the root folder, PHP can access files that are stored elsewhere and include them. Let's take a look at using server-side includes. In the Chapter 7, 07_02 folder of the exercise files is a subfolder called includes, and it contains two files, copyright.php and para.html. This is copyright.php. It contains the definition of a custom function called linCopyright, and because this is PHP code, the file must begin with a PHP opening tag. Para.html contains an HTML paragraph that contains a link to another file. It's going to be included in another page, so it's just a snippet of HTML. It doesn't have a doc type, head, or body. There's nothing wrong with putting the doc type or head in an external file, but when everything has been merged together, the resulting web page should have only one doc type, HTML element, head, and body. I'm going to include these files in this file here, parent.php, which is in the main 07_02 folder. Let's just open that. At the moment it contains only HTML. What I'm going to do is to include that paragraph, para.html, after the first paragraph in the HTML here. So insert a new line and then a PHP block. And inside that PHP block, we need to have the include command. So include. Now, many developers use parentheses after include as though it's a function, but it's not a function. It's actually what's called a PHP language construct, and using parentheses is entirely optional. Anything that's optional means extra typing, so I'm going to leave it out. We need a string, and that needs to contain the path to the file that we want to include. Because of the way that PHP looks for external files, it's best to use a document relative path, beginning with // to indicate that the path begins in the current folder. You can also use an absolute path. What you can't use is a path that's relative to the site root. In other words, a path that begins with a /. If you try to do that, it just won't work. So we're going down into the includes folder, and then what we're looking for is para.html. And I'm going to duplicate that line and then move it down below the next paragraph. So we're including the same paragraph twice. So if we save that and then load the page into a browser, here's the result. The HTML that's in the external file has got a different class. That's why we've got this different color background. But if we right-click and view the page source, apart from the text here, there's absolutely no indication that the content comes from a different file. Everything has been merged together on the server. So let's see what happens if the file can't be found. I'm going to close View Source and then go back to the editing program. And instead of para.html, I'm going to change this to para.htm. PHP won't be able to find that because it doesn't exist. If we go back to the browser, there is the ordinary HTML, and then we get this warning, includes para.htm, failed to open stream, no such file or directory. Then we've got another warning, but because we used include, the PHP script continues. So we then get the next HTML paragraph, and then we get the second external file. That's got the correct path, so it's included correctly. But let's see what happens if instead of using include, we use require. So go back to the editing program and change include here to require. Save that and refresh the page in the browser. We get the original HTML, then we get a warning, require, includes para.htm, failed to open stream, no such file or directory. Then we get a fatal error, and then nothing else. Because we used require, once a file can't be found, the script is abandoned. So let's include the function definition now and then use the function. So go back to the editing program. Let's just correct that so we don't end up with nothing. And then on line 14, I'm going to add a separate PHP block to include the function definition. I'm doing that for a particular reason which will become obvious in a moment. So require, and then the path to includes, and then copyright.php. And after that PHP block, which has included the function definition, we can now use the function. So we'll have an HTML paragraph, then immediately inside there we'll use the PHP shorthand for echo, and we can then call the function lin copyright. And I'm recording this in 2015, so that will be the start year that we pass to it. And then outside of the PHP block, my name. So if we save that and reload the page into the browser, we're getting both of those external files in, and then we've included the definition of lin copyright, and it's echoed the copyright notice with 2015 as the year. So that has worked well. But if we go back to the editing program, and the reason that I put this in a separate PHP block is I want to show you what happens if you have the function called before you include the function definition from an external file. So I've moved the function call one line above where I'm including the function definition. So if we save that and go back to the browser. This time, fatal error, call to undefined function lin copyright. The function is undefined because it's in an external file, and it's only when a function is used in the same file as it's defined that you can call the function before the actual definition. If the function definition is in an external file, that external file must be included first before you can call the function. So let's go back to the editing program. One more thing that I want to look at, and that is using include once. But to prevent that problem with the undefined function, let's just move that back down there to the correct position. And then instead of require for para.html, I'll use include once. And if there's a possibility that the file might be included a second time, you must use include once each time that the file is referenced. So we need to make this include once also down here. So if we now save that and reload the page into the browser, this time that external file is displayed only once. Even though it's listed down here in the PHP, it's not in the HTML. One final thing, this paragraph contains a link to another page. Let's click that. Not found. The requested URL was not found on this server. The problem is that the link in the include file is relative to the includes folder. But once the file has been included in the parent file, it becomes part of the parent file, so the link no longer points to the correct location. This is an important issue that we'll explore in the next video. When using server-side includes for common elements of a web page, such as a navigation menu, you need to be careful to avoid broken links. I've copied all the files from the end of the previous video into the chapter 7 07_03 folder of the exercise files. Let's load parent.php in a browser. And then we'll click this link again. This is the one that comes from an external file. And it says the page was not found. The important thing to note here is it says the requested URL, Introducing PHP chapter 07 linked.php. So it's looking for the file in the chapter 07 folder rather than in the 07_03 subfolder. So let's see why that's happening. Go back to the editing program, and here is para.html. There is the link in there. And if we load this directly into a browser and then click that link, it gets the correct page. So the reason for that is that para.html is inside the includes folder, and it needs to go up one level to be able to find linked.php. But when para.html is included in parent.php, it becomes an integral part of the page. So the document relative link no longer points to the correct folder. To fix this, external files need to use links that are relative to the site root, and that confuses many people. The path to include an external file needs to be document relative, but all the links inside an included file need to be relative to the site root. In this case, there's just one link in this file, so I could edit this link by adding a _/ at the beginning of the href attribute, and then adding introducing PHP /chapter 07 /07_03. But there's a much better way to do it when you've got multiple links. So what you need to do is, after the opening quotes of href, immediately there, no space in between, you need to have a PHP block. And I'm going to use the PHP shortcut for echo. And then I'm going to use a variable called site root, then my semicolon and the closing PHP tag, and then get rid of those two dots before the /. Make sure that there is no space between the closing PHP tag and that /. And then what we need to do is to save that, and then go to the parent page, parent.php, and above the doc type declaration, we need to define site root. So inside a PHP tag there, We create the variable site root, and then we need to define it. In this particular case, it's /introducing PHP, then ch07/07_03. So if we save that, everything should now work. Now you might be wondering what's going to happen here. This has got a .html file name extension, and I've put some PHP in there. Doesn't matter. Thing is that it's going to be included in parent.php, so this PHP will be correctly interpreted by the PHP engine. So if we go back to parent.php and load it into a browser, just make sure that we've refreshed it correctly, and then we click link to another page, and this time we get to the correct page. And that's how you deal with links inside external files that are used as server-side includes. Although you use a document relative path to include a file, links inside the external file should be relative to the site root. A server-side include is merged with its parent file, which might be at a different level in the site hierarchy. Using site root relative links inside include files ensures they'll always point to the correct location. In this example, I've used only a hyperlink, but the same principle also applies to assets, such as images and style sheets that are linked to from a server-side include.